Um, Obviously, I'd like to thank you for being here. I understand Mozart's great Mass in C minor is being performed over at the festival, but now, so I'm very humbled by the fact that you chose to come here to listen to me. I'll try not to disappoint you, and I'll try to keep this really brief. I was telling Carol before, I'm very excited to be doing this talk without PowerPoint or flashy images or videos. It's the first time I give a talk in many years without technology, and I feel quite liberated by the fact that I'm here with a piece of paper and you're sitting around and we can have a dialogue. And given the title of my talk, which is about how technology can empower us, this may be a bit ironic, the fact that I feel liberated by not having technology and I can just focus on what I want to say and what I want to communicate. So I'll just be consulting my notes. One of my arguments today is that technology itself isn't good or bad, it's how we use it that matters. So technology has the potential to do a lot of good, probably a bit of harm too, but as I said, it all depends on how we use it, and that's why media literacy, which is at the heart of what we do here, the Salzburg Academy on Media and Global Change, is so important because it is about reflecting on our routines, on our the ways we use the media, what we do with the media, but it's also about how we communicate with each other, and ultimately it's about who we are and our identities and our communities. So that was sort of the peripheral argument. My central thesis is that whereas one could say that the 20th century was the century of the big ideologies and the grand narratives and collective action, the first decades, at least, of the 21st century are probably going to be known, or I'd like to label them as the age of engagement. I should clarify from the start, I'm neither celebrating nor condemning this trend. I'm just merely trying to observe something which I think is happening, is already happening, and which is quite profound in global scale. So this is the headline of my argument, the big claim. So what I'll do now is briefly talk a bit about my journey and my interests and how I got involved in this and why I think it's happening, but more importantly, what the implications of this age of engagement are. So just to give you a bit of background about my research, over the last 10 years I've been researching some of the key questions to do with democracy and the state of democracy today. Are people participating? If not, why not? Are liberal democracies facing a crisis of trust? And what's the impact or the role of the media in this process, especially when it comes to younger people? Thomas told me that the theme of this year's subnetTALKs is on fire, and what makes you passionate about the things you do. And I reflected on that, and I thought that what started all this is the fact that basically I'm very passionate about politics. I've always been since I can remember myself. And growing up in Greece in the 1970s and 80s, a country which is very rich in political dramas, I'm sure you all know by now. So it was a very interesting period. And and I remember when I was about 10 years old, and most of the kids in my age went out to play football. I would just glue myself to the television and watch parliamentary debates, and as if that wasn't a problem in itself, I then got shocked because I thought, wow, not everyone is equally interested in politics, and that was really a revelation to me, and I got really frustrated because I thought it was so obvious. How can you not be interested in politics? So that got me into a process of thinking of why do people engage with politics? Why are some people just don't bother? They think that it doesn't relate to them, and why are some people so passionate and so involved? So some people, when they grow up, they want to become like dancers and astronauts and I don't know, firemen, and these are all very exciting professions. When I grew up, I wanted to become or study politics, which is boring, but according to many people. But anyway, so the question that's been bugging me from the beginning was because politics is about power. So I'm thinking, where is power? Okay, where can we see power? Where is it situated? And we're told traditionally that governments and parliaments have power, and through them we, the citizens, have power. Actually, that's not entirely true, because over the last 20, 30 years, even before that, especially in the last 20, 30 years, governments have been, and parliaments have been losing some of that power. Now, losing is a bit of a misleading term because it wasn't an accident of nature. It was a political decision to give away some of the power, to deregulate markets, to deregulate parts of public life, and empower NGOs, international organizations, corporations, other actors in the political system. So then I started realizing that actually the media were really important, and the media and journalists held a lot of power, because as Steve was saying earlier today, they can frame the debate, they can choose what to report on and what to exclude, they can exclude voices, stories, or include voices and stories and so on. So I thought, fine, I'll also study the media and try to pinpoint power there. But then I found that, which was quite frustrating again, because that power just kept being very elusive and slipping away, that the media actually are facing a crisis. Newspapers are declining. We've seen the fragmentation of digital television and satellite television and so on. There's the rise of the internet. It's very chaotic, very sort of pluralistic in one sense, but also very anarchic environment on the other sense. So I don't think we can say that journalists are having the same level of consolidated power as they used to. They still are very important, but as the old mantra goes, power is everywhere. And then that thing called the people kept coming up again and again. I mean, people vote and change governments, people buy newspapers or switch TV channels. People have power, and the people can be part of change. And no system, no social system, whether that is a political system or a familial system or any system, can survive without legitimacy. Legitimacy is not an abstract concept, it's actually a very, very specific thing in real life. So that sent me back to square one, and I thought, okay, EU, international organizations, the media, they're all fine, they're all very interesting, but actually they don't make sense without people. And that made me a bit more disappointed, because I thought, well, citizens are really important in the ecosystem of democracy, yet so many people just don't bother to participate, maybe. And remember, I'm talking about the 1990s, the 2000s, last couple of decades, when apathy or being apolitical wasn't just an option, it was the zeitgeist. You were supposed to be, if you said that you were interested in politics, then you were suddenly uncool. You had to be apathetic to be to fit in, at least in some circles. So, and we live in an era when the number of your Facebook friends and your Twitter followers says more about you and your identity than the political party that you vote for. That's very different from say 30, 40, 50 years ago. Trust in government, membership of political parties, voting, all the measurements that political scientists we use to evaluate the health of a democracy, they've all been declining steadily. But at the same time, we've seen different forms of engagement emerging, social movements, online petitions, social consumption, fair trade, and so on, an increased role for celebrities. In his book on the unfinished global revolution, Mark Malloch-Brown, a top British diplomat, former Deputy Secretary General of the UN, said that wrote that more people in Britain donate to Oxfam today. Oxfam is a poverty NGO, than are members of political parties. And he also said that when they had the 2005 G8 Gleneagles Summit, you may remember there was a campaign globally to make poverty history. Politicians try to engage with celebrities, and celebrities such as Bono and Bob Geldof carried a type of power and popular support which was which has been unprecedented, which was always enjoyed by politicians. So there are loads of actors. Anyway, and from 2002 to 2010, 8 years for my PhD research, I set out to find the factors that motivate and demotivate young people from participating, looking specifically at how they engage with NGO websites. I'm not going to go into detail about the thesis. It's online on my website, via my website. You can access it if you want. But basically what I concluded was that young people can engage with public affairs as long as a series of terms and conditions are fulfilled. We can have a discussion about them. They have to do with emotional engagement, with visual engagement. They're quite related to creative sectors, to how we engage online, and how we structure information and messages and so on. Uh, Really important for the message to be relevant to people's everyday life. Otherwise, they don't understand why they have to engage. But also, that's not enough. You have to also explain how one person's action is going to make a difference, which is sometimes really difficult because um, it's not always about one person changing the world. It could be just, it doesn't work like that. That's too easy. It will never happen. But it's about one person or a group of people making an effort and then making a contribution as part of a broader context. But what I noticed was a gap between the macro level of governments and societies and the micro level of individuals. And the young people taking part in my study, they felt that gap a lot. In tens of thousands of words written and spoken by young people, which I transcribed for my research, there wasn't a single reference to a collective mechanism of participation, of identity, of engagement. Nothing about the nation or the European Union or the government or political parties. Or it was all about the self and the sort of the community, the life world, and the community around our everyday life. Okay, and that was very interesting. But that was sort of the terms and conditions. The overall image was one sense of civic consumerism. So we used to saying that issues are like products and they need to be marketed, and causes are like products, and political marketing and branding and all these techniques have come into politics. But it's actually the process of political participation itself, democracy itself, has become a product that needs to be sold, that competes against a myriad of other choices and things we can do. Think of all the billions of websites and blogs and Facebook status updates and tweets and iPhone apps and newspapers and magazines and all the different media and the different products and artifacts that surround us. There's a whole world of free entertainment and escapism, and why would a person choose to and the word choose here is very important, why would they choose to engage unless that engagement is somehow made relevant to them? And by the way, and we can explore this further if you're interested in a moment, I'm not, by engagement I don't just mean engagement of one-to-many in the corporate sense, just corporate sense or just the political sense. It's about how we engage with each other, how we communicate. For example, during the last couple of years, my colleagues and I at the Academy have been doing comparative research on a global scale about how students use the media. And one of the things that I found with my participants is that there's this trend, because of the convenience of new media, for young people to withdraw to the private sphere of their flat or their house, even their bedroom. All the devices are in the bedroom. We don't need to leave the bedroom to make things happen. And what that causes is a certain disconnection from urban landscapes, from rural landscapes, from the space and the time of real life. I know real life is the word real is very contentious because people say that what's happening online is real, and it's definitely real, but there's something else about the physical reality out there. So anyway, to finish what I was saying about the doctoral research, there was a clear sense of civic loneliness, of people feeling quite lonely in terms of civic terms. They felt that, how can I make a difference? I'm on my own. So they couldn't see that they were part of a broader social structure, which I thought was really interesting. Some people have called that selfish individualism, consumerism, evidence of widespread moral decline, and it's certainly individualism and consumerism, and there is an ethical aspect or moral aspect to it, I think. But I wouldn't be so quick as to judge young people, because we're talking about massive processes in terms of civic culture that have taken place over decades, and over which within which we get socialized. So it's not that we have no control, but you need a process of empowerment and education to be able to challenge these patterns within which you get socialized and question your own behavior. So to summarize this, on the one hand you've got culture, civic culture, which is structured around our choice in the media and in life, and consumer choice and liberty and politics is a very small proportion of what we talk about because it has to compete. And then on the other hand, you've got massive, complicated challenges facing us today. The agenda of the 21st century is filled with really complex, interdependent problems, and action by governments isn't enough. Even action by coalitions of governments isn't enough. What you need to do is alter people's behavior. I mean, climate change is the obvious example here, but there are other examples. I just want to give you one crude one: the food crisis from 2006 to 2008, and then again 2020 2011. Was a global rise in food prices, and that led to a series of humanitarian crises, and this has been attributed to the use of agricultural fields for biofuel, the rise in oil prices, the rise of demand for meat in China, extreme weather phenomena caused by by climate change, the role of multinational corporations in setting cereal prices, changes to dietary patterns with the production of 1 kilo of beef requiring 7 kilos of feed grains, so all sorts of different things coming into it, but the effect of it is there's hunger affecting stability in 36 countries, and that affects trade, it affects security. So it's a whole cobweb of issues and communities being involved, and it's really complicated and it's really important. But the discourse, our public discourse, doesn't always reflect that complexity. So for me, all these are really important issues. Climate change is obviously it's a matter of survival, but the practical problem at the moment is the central problem facing democracies, liberal democracies, is failure of governance. The inability, the inaction of governments to take action that is meaningful, and because of either the political cost, the perceived reaction from citizens, or because of vested interests, of corruption, of other factors limiting their ability to make these decisions. And we know that it's possible to act on climate change. We know that it's possible to end hunger and poverty. We know it's possible to have a fairer and more egalitarian and more accountable tax system, but these things are not happening. We know that they're there, we can see them happening, and we know that nothing is happening. So there's a problem. So I think what I fear is that liberal democracies have entered this vicious cycle in which very little is done, this short-termism, in the name of the political cost of being in touch with public opinion, and then that leads the problem, as was the case with the Eurozone. The problem bursts, and then what you have is crisis governance. And when you have crisis governance, when there's a natural disaster or another type of crisis, you don't have time for deliberation, you don't have time for democracy. You need to make decisions quickly, not because of a conspiracy or a coup d'etat or something, but because there simply isn't enough time. So our fear of the so-called political cost, our fear of vested interest, our fear of engaging in public that needs to be engaged, have led to a limbo of inaction that sooner or later, probably sooner, will put democracy at risk. And we've already seen this with the rise of extremism in Europe, how people are seeking easy solutions, simple narratives of good and evil. So therefore, decisions need to be made, and I can only see two ways in which this can happen. You either force people to participate or impose decisions upon them, which is clearly unacceptable and goes against any notion of democracy. But actually, if we don't have global reform in terms of global governance and global citizenship, this is what's going to happen. Or you can persuade people to participate, i.e., engage with them. And that can happen in a number of ways. I know I'm running out of time, and I just want to say this last thing, that it can be done, that there are ways in which you can positively engage people, and people can change their behavior and they can be educated. I know the phrase educating the public is very controversial. Some people think that it's very patronizing and that we shouldn't educate the public because the public know best. We can have a debate about it if you want, but my personal view is we certainly need to listen to the public and take the input from the public, obviously. But the government has a responsibility to at least set some institutional parameters for dialogue, because this relativism, I mean, I'm not a relativist, and I think it's a useful analytical tool, but it often is used as an excuse for inaction. So to go back to how we can engage people, this can be done, this is really the final thing, it can be done either from the top down or from the bottom up. From the top down, we can do that by being smarter about the way we communicate with others, listening to users, for example, on the internet, how the just very practical examples, information architecture, user experience, understanding how users behave, what they need, why they make certain decisions when they're online, and building messages and websites. This is again an example of that really address these needs and that communicate with people and that engage them. Another example, I mean, TED Talks, and there's plenty of examples of avars, organizations and websites and institutions achieving that level of engagement through emerging forms of storytelling, emerging narratives. But for me, the role of hope and of positive messages is really, really important. One of the massive, colossal mistakes, I think, of the climate change campaign has been so far to project this really depressing, judgmental and disempowering message that we're all gonna die anyway. So, and there's not much we can do about it, you know. And people, my students, the people who participate in my research, always say, "What's the point? We're gonna die anyway." I mean, they've gone way beyond understanding the problem. They've just gone into denial or into I don't care, I don't want to listen because it's too depressing, I can't engage with this. So hope and positive encouragement, in engagement, whether you're talking about engaging with a child and pedagogy, or whether you are engaging with superpower in diplomacy, having positive acknowledgement of what can be done is a good thing. And another top-down way is by building institutions that cater for the constituencies of the 21st century. Again, a very complicated discussion. Just it's a little caveat I have here. Just say, I'm not saying this is not an argument against institutions. It's actually an argument in defense of institutions. I've been called many things, good and bad, in my life, but one of the most interesting ones was being called a neo-institutionalist. Perhaps you can explain to me what that means, but I think it probably means that I'm in favor of institutions, so I think it's a good thing. But anyway, and then there are ways of from the bottom up to empower people and enable them to, especially young people, to reflect on their identities and how they use the media, and through that be able to express their voices. And that's precisely what we're trying to do here at the Academy. And I'm very excited to be part of that, and I'm really looking forward to doing this over the next 3 weeks, in fact. So that was the initial thesis, if you like, and I can elaborate if you need me to during the discussion. All right, thank you for your attention.